Welcome to episode 45.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
It's a new year, and if you're like me, you are already thinking about warmer weather and taking that getaway to that tropical or exotic destination. Maybe you plan to travel to Walt Disney World or Universal Studios. No matter what kind of trip you plan, 3D Travel Company is the company for you. Just visit 3dtravelcompany.com and let them know that Trenton sent you from Who Did That Voice. Or you can book on www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips booked and traveled by the end of 2017. Book today and travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. All February long of 2017, we have been covering the original Deke release Sailor Moon animated series from the 1990s, and today is the last of 5 interviews for that show. Today's special guest is Artemis.
That's right, Sailor Scouts, the 5th Scout's here, and I'm her guardian, Artemis. Meet Sailor Venus. We're united at last. Looking sharp there, kitty cat. Well, Luna, sure been a long time. Pretty sight, huh? I can't tell you how happy we are to finally be joined up with you guys.
You'll get fat.
Artemis.
Don't blame me when you're bursting out of your scout clothes.
Looks pretty tasty. You didn't make it, did you?
You'd think these bubbleheads would realize it's only cake. Sardines are the rage these days. Luna, let me explain.
Too late, Artemis.
Luna, come on, just listen to me. Luna, stop. We have to talk.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show we have Ron Rubin joining us. Ron, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
That was my alter ego. It's my pleasure, Trenton, and it's nice to be here. Thank you very much for asking me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and for donating some of your very precious and valuable time to us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Well, Ron, the very first thing we always like to start out with is just to get a little background on who our special guest is and how did you get into the voiceover world?
Boy, that's a big chunk of a question, but I'll try to answer that. It kind of, well, because I came from a background of sports and scholastics, and I was going to school, and then I always used to play around with the voices, and in high school I kind of teamed up with a buddy, and we wrote little sketches, and in university I had my own radio show, and it was kind of a half-hour Sunday night comedy show, and I just I voiced all the characters, and back then there was no kind of sound effect CDs or albums or anything like that, and so I had to kind of do all the if I wanted a door to open or to pop champagne, I would just do all the sound effects myself, and I just got to love playing with my voice and doing the voices and the sound effects and everything. Long story short, I moved to Toronto, Canada after school, and started with Second City doing improv and stand-up comedy, and one thing led to another, and I did a lot of voices and sound effects in my act, and I was asked to audition for some cartoons, and I think Tim Burton and Beetlejuice was one of my very first ones, and I had never done one before, and I got to make all these sounds and characters, and I said, "Oh my God, they're actually paying me money to have fun with my voice and play," and so it's I hope that wasn't too long and convoluted of an answer, but I came through a comedy background, through a writing background, through a radio background, but long story short, I just auditioned for a cartoon and got a cartoon, and that's what set me off.
Well, that is fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing that, Ron. And don't worry about being long-winded or anything, because this is all of what the show is about, by learning people's background. And, everybody gets into the industry different ways. And, this show is called Who Did That Voice? Because we're learning about who that person is, which is you, and, learning about your background and your history and, the shows you've worked on and the experiences you've learned from, because
Sure.
it's all different and unique because it's your story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, things have changed a lot since I first started doing this around 30 years ago. I teach animation, and so I have a lot of students asking how to get into the business. And now, there's a lot with social media and putting your stuff, up there on YouTube, and having home studios and going to different websites that you can kind of just, send in MP3s from your phone and stuff like that. When I started, there was none of that. So it was the good old-fashioned, agencies and big studios and casting, and it was very old school, but things have changed a bit. But that's kind of how I got my start. Just I've always been doing voices and sound effects, and one thing led to another, and I got my foot in the door. And it was back in the early '80s, and it was at the time that there was a big comedy boom and a big cartoon boom, and people were just starting to really kind of elaborate on getting into the business, getting into projects, and a lot of the American companies would come up to Canada to record, and it was a marvelous time, because there wasn't necessarily the competition that there is these days, and there was a handful of us, and we got to do everything, and we learned by our bootstraps of just being in the studio and having to do it on the spot, and sometimes that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you briefly mentioned being on Beetlejuice. What did you play on that show?
I had, Beetlejuice was amazing. I got to work with Tim Burton, which, at the time just kind of blew my mind. And Beetlejuice, I don't know if you're familiar with the cartoon. It was one of the best cartoons.
Yeah.
I had so much fun on that. By the end of it, I played about 12 different characters. I don't know if you remember Doom Buggy, his the car that he drove around on. So, et cetera, et cetera. So I was Doom Buggy. I was Barry Minot, who was the fast-talking kind of KTEL announcer that popped out of coffins and came out of TV sets and did all the commercials. Like almost every episode, there was kind of this crazy fast-talking. He always looked different and kind of was kind of in a different bizarrely drawn kind of caricature. But he did all the kind of fast-talking announcements. And for only $29.99, you two can get this casket. And it went on and on. So I did that. I did one of the I didn't do the monster across the street. I did the little monster across the street, and I played a whole bunch of other characters. Some I can remember and some I can't. But Tim was great, and the directors were wonderful. And you just got into the studio, and we had the main principal cast, which is what you have in most cartoons. And then, of course, in every episode there'd be the leads, and then there'd be all these secondary roles, and who wants to be the chair of the tree, the frog, whoever the case, and I will, and okay, let's make him sound like this, and him sound like this, and him sound like, and it was a real kind of a schooling in voices, and it was just fabulous. And that was one of my first ones, and it just blew my mind that wow, I can do this, and I'm being allowed to do this, number one, and number two, I'm fooling them all because I'm doing this, and they're not saying anything except good stuff. And it was Beetlejuice was one of my first and one of my favorites.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you got to be on that show, because it was a wild and zany show, but it kept the true really essence of Tim Burton, even in an animated form. I loved it, so I'm glad you got to work with him. That had to be super fascinating.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. It really was awesome.
Well, tell me, what was it like getting to play a mad scientist back in 1988, playing Dr. Bad Vibes? Vibes. I can't even talk.
Bad Vibes, yes.
I totally tripped over myself. I know the character, and I'm still stumbling.
The evil Dr. Bad Vibes. Dr. Bad Vibes to this day is one of my fave characters. The show Cops, the Central Organization of Police Specialists, was also a very early 80s kind of cartoon, and it was one of my first as well. Back then, I just have to say to your audience, there's a few different ways to record animation. One of them is ensemble, which means the whole cast is there, and you're there kind of interacting and playing with everybody, and it makes the performances a lot of fun, and you play off each other. These days, a lot of shows are done kind of singularly. They'll bring in I just did a cartoon yesterday, and I was brought in just for, my character, my lines, and you're in and you're out very quickly, and you're concentrating on your character and your voice, but you're not playing off the other people. So back in the day, back in the 80s and early 90s, almost all the shows were done ensemble, and it was just a great way to record. And that show had just like cliche wonder. I love the villains, to be honest, Trent. I've played a lot of straight, more characters more aligned to my voice. But I really love the kind of good old-fashioned kind of villains because they all have the wicked laugh and they can kind of get away with murder. And so Dr. Bad Vibes is kind of like, that kind of, I don't know if you want to call it cliche or not, but I just love that sort of thing. And I gave him a bit of an English slant, and he was kind of this androgynous character. If you see him, he has this glass dome on the top of his head with his brain showing. He was one of my favorite characters, and when I do signings and appearances at Comic-Cons now, it surprises me how much of a following Cops has and Dr. Bad Vibes. And I don't know if you remember, okay, here's a question for you. Who was Dr. Bad Vibes' little henchman?
Oh, gosh.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember.
It was a little tiny robot named Buzzbomb.
Okay, yeah, Buzzbomb.
Yeah. So I played Buzzbomb, too. So, Buzzbomb was... I just did all sorts of mechanical robotic effects. So I was the evil Dr. Bad Vibes and his little sidekick Buzzbomb, and it was just great. And also the cast, when I look back, were just all fabulous actors, and it was really a lot of fun. So Dr. Bad Vibes was, truly one of my favorites, and I can't believe after all these years the fans are still kind of remembering it. But he's always been one of my faves.
Well, Dr. Bad Vibes always gave me the familiarity sound in some ways of the Crypt Keeper almost.
Oh, yes, I know the guy who played that. That's true. It wasn't patterned after that at all. As a matter of fact, I think Cops preceded Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah, I think so by far, yeah. But
wait a minute, maybe he stole my voice, yeah. But I mean, there is that kind of, that devilish kind of villainous kind of, I've used that voice in different, not the same. I try to obviously make every character different, but I play a character named Master Zox, Master XOX, in a cartoon called Sidekicks. And he's kind of there, too, but he's not... Bad Vibes was higher and had a bit of a lilt and a bit of an English accent, and other characters I've played are kind of along those lines, but I try to separate all of them. But, yeah, he's a bit of a Crypt Keeper-ish kind of character, absolutely. Talking about different characters, around that time, I think I was in a police academy, and I had the lead in that. I was playing Carrie Mahoney, the Steve Guttenberg part from the movie, and that had to be my own voice, and that was the hardest part for me to do. I don't know if you're going to ask me about that, about Police Academy or not, but I mean, it's just kind of hitting me now that I love kind of committing to the character, hiding behind the character, whatever you want to call it. And when I had to use my own voice, my real voice, I was much more conscious of how I sounded. There's a lot of actors who are very comfortable with their own voice, and it's when they have to go cartoony that it's kind of difficult for them. And I'm kind of the opposite. So when I had to play Carrie Mahoney for Police Academy, I thought I would get the part of the guy who made all the sound effects, the Michael Winslow part,
Yeah.
But I think they did all those sound effects in post, and so I ended up getting, the part that I got, and it was great. It was fun, but if you watch it, it's kind of just me, hey, come on, get back here. What are you doing? And I was way more conscious of just kind of sounding like myself because I much prefer to kind of go into full commitment to characters,
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to ask you about Officer
Oh, well,
Mahoney.
then we can just cut all that out and you can ask me.
No. We'll keep it. Well, the next question I have for you, Ron, is did you grow up as a young boy reading comic books?
You know what? I wasn't a huge... I read the odd Batman and Archie and Spider-Man, but you know what? I wasn't I wasn't holed up in my room reading comic books. Growing up, I don't have this fabulous collection of 5,000 comic books. I really don't.
Well, I just was curious because, you were able to voice a character named Morph from the 1992 animated X-Men series.
Yes.
And I wanted to know, what was it like to get to play Morph on that show? Because honestly, he was an amazing character.
Yeah, no, Morph, that's a huge one. Now, Morph, for those of people who don't know, in the comic book, he was the Changeling. And so the Changeling had the powers to kind of change into anything and anyone. And then when they came about and did when Marvel Comics and Stan Lee finally agreed to do the animated series, and this was the very first one. This was X-Men TAS, the animated series.
Yeah.
And they were casting Morph, right, whose mutant powers allowed him to metamorphosize into anything and anyone. And I, being kind of a specialist in doing all sorts of different voices and had a comedy background, they kind of they really liked me for the part of Morph. And it was a really fun part, and I got to play different people and different things. And then one day, very early on in the first season, it might have even been in the first script or two, I'm reading it, and I see that Morph is left for dead, and he is killed off. And this is the worst thing a voice actor, or an actor, or any actor wants to read in a script about his character, is that, what do you mean you killed me off? Now, it's really interesting that you're asking about this now, because I've been in touch with the showrunner and one of the head writers of the series in Los Angeles, and it's coming up to the 25th anniversary of the X-Men animated series, and it's been voted again and again the top 10, the best animated series of all time. Anyway, he's doing a definitive book on X-Men, the animated series, with all the behind-the-scenes stuff and all the graphics and all the characters and the cast and everything. And I've been able to talk to him a lot and about the Morph character. And so here's the deal with Morph. They and you're right on the money with what your research told you. They had him befriend Wolverine. Wolverine was obviously one of the featured, main principal characters of X-Men, and they said they did that on purpose to get them kind of bonding, and so the audience would really kind of like Morph. So then when they killed off Morph, it would have that much more impact on the audience, and they could, it was one of the few cartoons, if possibly the only one still to this day, where they killed off one of the lead characters, because Morph was introduced as one of the leads, and then they killed him off. And what happened after that, they didn't prepare for, because they expected Morph to be killed off, and that was that. And there was a huge, and I should preface all this by saying, I think the purists, the absolute X-Men purists, were kind of hesitant about Morph because he wasn't necessarily, Morph himself was not in the comic book, and so they brought him in there for literary purpose to do other things. So when they killed him off, something happened that they didn't expect, and Morph seemed to have a ton of fans of the show that loved Morph. And the showrunner and the writer was telling me that they did all these focus groups and everything, and Morph was actually one of the most popular characters. He was in the top 3 popular. So I don't know. He didn't do that many episodes, but he gained some popularity. I don't know if people liked the vulnerability of him or just that he had a bit of a sense of humor. But there was a huge writing campaign to save Morph after they killed him off.
Wow.
And so the writer, Eric, said, "You really screwed us, because I don't know if you played your part so well or whatever the case, but we killed you off, and we had a 3-year story arc on the episodes, and they didn't really include Morph. And here we're getting all these pressure from the higher ups, the networks, the broadcasters, saying that we need to bring Morph back because he turned out to be a really popular character." So they had Mr. Sinister plant an evil brain in him. And so for all you X-Men fans who are real fans, you'll understand all this. So they left him to die, and Mr. Sinister put an evil brain in him, and he came back as the evil Morph. and maybe he was only in about 8 or a dozen episodes. I don't know. It just seems like a lot more, but it's funny. Everywhere I go, people kind of still know Morph and remember Morph, and he wasn't in that many, but the episodes that he was in, with him saving Wolverine and him kind of turning into and saving the X-Men and everything like that, I guess were memorable. But that's the story of Morph, and it's a really fascinating one. I hope I'm not boring you.
No, it's super fascinating to hear all the backstory, because growing up, I loved watching the X-Men animated series. I didn't realize it was the first that Marvel had done, but it is in my top 10. It has to be in the top 10 or top 5, because it was just so well done. The animation was amazing. The acting was killer. I mean, they've done a lot of new shows for X-Men since then, and it still holds more weight for me than some of the newer ones they've done more recently even. So...
Oh, I appreciate that, because in all the there's a lot of online polls and all that kind of stuff, and apparently the original series is the one that people really love. I just because we're talking about it, I have the damn intro music playing in my head now. I can't get it out. But
the theme song was killer. It was amazing.
As far as Morph is, I mean, it's funny because I was so excited to get them. Oh, and also let's not forget Stan Lee was there on day one.
Wow.
And this was way back before Marvel was the empire that it is now, and putting out, of course, all the the franchise and all the movies and everything that they're doing now. But back then, it was like, okay, yeah, I've heard of Marvel Comics and Stan Lee, but nowhere near, he didn't have the godlike status he has now, and Marvel Comics was not.
Yeah.
So, but there I was, and within a span of a few years, and I'm not saying this out of ego or to blow my own horn. I'm saying it out of humility and almost that, I got to work with Tim Burton and with Stan Lee and with Howard Morris, and this all was in my early 20s of, my first couple of years of even getting into the business. So it still blows me away to this day. But anyway, Morph is you've been touching on a lot of my favorite characters, but that's the story of Morph. So they brought him back as the evil Morph, and he struggled with that. And as far as my vocal changes, it's interesting because Morph was just kind of an energetic, rendition of my own voice. And hey, come on, Wolverine, look out! But when he became evil, all of a sudden that cute laugh of his turned into a bit more of a I kind of went down on the laugh instead of up, and I kind of had to, his eyes went a little buggy, and if you see pictures, actually I have this great illustration that I sign at Comic-Cons now, and I have a friend who's a wonderful graphic artist, and he drew the good Morph, who's kind of in torment, and there's shattered glass everywhere, and in one of the larger pieces of shattered glass looking back at him is the evil Morph, and then overlooking all of this is Mr. Sinister. It's a really, really cool picture.
Wow.
So a lot of X-Men fans look at that and they just go, wow. So anyway, we're hoping that the book is a success and that we're out on the road and we're going to reassemble the original cast and kind of start promoting it and everything like that. So I didn't realize it was kind of the 25th year of anniversary, but that was such a great series in so many ways.
Absolutely. Well, it released in October of 92, so this coming October in 2017 will be 25 years from its release, so it's still a few months away, but it is coming up very, very quickly. So we've just hit the 24th anniversary. So Ron, back in 1999, you got to be an Avenger who was named Vision, and what was it like getting to play an Avenger?
That was kind of cool. That came on the heels of doing X-Men, of course, and we only did one season of that, if I'm not mistaken. I think
sadly.
We only did. Yeah, and it wasn't the best. It's like you think of the Avengers now, and you think of Iron Man and Captain America and everything, and this was kind of a. I won't say the B-cast at all because it had some of the primary greatest Avengers around. And back then, of course, like now, if you got to audition or be an Avenger or an X-Man, I mean, it carries a whole different weight because of, where it's come to all these years. But back then, and I hadn't been a big comic book reader, so I just, I thought this is an amazing opportunity, and oh my God, this is great. And once again, it's the Stan Lee connection, and on the heels of X-Men, and they're casting for Avengers. Now, you have to understand that a lot of the voices I've done up until this point have been kind of cartoony and Beetlejuicy and Dr. Bad vibes and everything. So first I get Morph, which is kind of my natural voice, but I allowed to do, I got to do all sorts of other voices as Morph. But then the Vision was really interesting because, and I can't do the voice just over the phone, at least I won't do it justice, but the Vision talked very kind of syncopated, very robotic, and I think they might have put a little reverb on it. But Wonder Man, where would you go? I mean, he was talking very softly, but it was my absolute natural voice, but in a way that I had to do it as an android. And it was I loved it, to be honest with you. I was saying earlier how I wasn't crazy about doing like my normal voice, but this wasn't my normal voice because I had to affect it as a la an android speaking, and I just thought it was the coolest character in the world. I really did. I loved playing Vision and being an Avenger, and I wish it would have gone for more than one season because I really loved that character. And just recently the new Marvel, the Age of Ultron came out, and they introduced the Vision on the big screen, and I thought that was kind of cool. Paul Bettany played him. Did you see that?
I did. It was fantastic to finally see Vision come to fruition in the feature film.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool,
Yeah.
and so I kind of thought, okay, well, good. This will kind of maybe start up the old Avengers series because they're re-releasing, Vision on the world. But way back then, 30 years ago, it was the Vision and Ultron and I forget all the other characters that were in there. But it was just wonderful, and once again, just amazing to work with Stan Lee and that whole LA gang and Marvel Comics. And I didn't know how lucky I was, put it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, you've gotten to work with some of the biggest greats of all times, especially today. Their fame has grown enormously since 20 or 30 years ago. And it's amazing that you got to work with them at such a young stage in your career and in your life. So
I know. I just did Fan Expo, which is the one of the largest Comic-Cons in the country, and Stan Lee was there, and I thought, because I have all these great Morph pictures, 8x10s, that I signed for fans, and I said, wouldn't it be cool to go say hi to Stan Lee again and get him to sign one? And then I looked at his lineup, and it was like 1,000 people at the door, and I said, I don't think I'm going to wait for 3 hours, but we did cross paths in the green room, but it was really neat to see him, and they say that's one of his last ones. He's kind of slowing down, so he's not going to be making a lot more appearances, from what I understand.
That's really sad, but it's understandable. Well, we've talked about some pretty darn amazing shows today, Ron, but there's one more that I have to ask you about. It was a show called Sailor Moon.
Of course, Sailor Moon. You can't talk to me without picking up Sailor Moon. We're saving Sailor Moon for the last. How perfect.
Absolutely. The best for last. Not really. All of these have been amazing, but it is kind of the topic of the month of February, and all of our special guests this month are from the original Sailor Moon cast. And what was it like getting to play?
Well, hi, all you Sailor Moon fans out there from Artemis. Absolutely.
Thank you
so
go
much.
On. No, thank you for saying that. That's fantastic. Yeah, so what was it like getting to play Artemis on that show, being the only actor to actually play Artemis on the original series? There's multiple Sailor Scouts and Sailor Moons and Tuxedo Masks, but I got to be Artemis from start to finish of the original Clover Leaf Deke dubbed North American series, which out of everything we've talked about so far, Trenton, when it comes to fans and loyalty and passion, the Sailor Moon fans are just insane. They're through the roof. They're so amazing. Like, they really are. I mean, when I do shows, there's definitely some fans for Dr. Bad Vibes or for X-Men or for Morph or for whoever, but say, "Oh my God, you were Artemis!" And I've toured with like the whole cast and with Sailor Mars and Jupiter and it's just amazing when we go to these specifically the anime cons that after. I guess around 25 years as well, because I know we did the big Anime Expo in Los Angeles for the 20th anniversary, and that was a few years ago. And there was hundreds of thousands of fans there, and it just blew our minds. It was one of the first times we had done a convention, because we had just started doing them back then. And to think what we did all those years ago, I mean, I've said that about other shows, but this one in particular, because
It really was the first crossover, anime show. I mean, now there are so many, and the culture is so deep with too many shows that I can even, mention. And to be honest, I don't know 3/4 of the shows, but somehow Sailor Moon really hit a niche. And it's there's only 2 male leads in the entire series, and that was Tuxedo Mask and Artemis. The rest were female characters, all the Sailor Scouts and Serena, and it was a very empowering show for girls, for women, because the lead characters for the first time, and I don't know, can you remember another show that had 4 or 5 or 6 lead female, girls kind of, saving the world and saving everyone else, and so the more I talk to fans, I just, it still blows me away the impact that show had, and there wasn't a whole lot of male characters, so when I auditioned for Artemis, it wasn't a huge audition process, and I just I used kind of my natural voice, and you have to understand, remember how I was explaining the difference between ensemble acting and coming in solo?
Yes.
Well, now we're entering a whole different forum, because now we're talking about dubbing, about syncing up, because with Sailor Moon, it had already been drawn, and so, and I should mention that 99% of original animation, like the animation that you see, in the theater or on TV or Family Guy or The Simpsons or whatever, the voice track gets laid down first, and then they draw to that. That's a really important kind of thing to understand, because then for Sailor Moon or for other programs coming in from other languages that you dub it in, it's already drawn. So we had to actually read the script and match the voices, and it's called ADR or dubbing. And so the words were written across the screen, and we had to basically read along with the words in order to sync up our vocals with the movements of the lips. Sorry if that's getting too technical.
No,
but I mean that's kind of how it worked. So anyway, long story short, it was our first time doing this, and so that was a brand new experience. Plus, we were thinking, what the heck is this crazy Japanese show where these girls are screaming and running around, and there's a cat and a dog fighting and whatever. And out of at least I knew when I was doing X-Men or Beetlejuice or whatever, there's a chance that this could be a hit. With Sailor Moon, we had no idea what it would become, and the impact it would have on fans. And playing Artemis was really cool. He kind of was just my own voice, and then the direction I got was, I don't know if this is too old for you to remember, but there used to be a TV show on a weekly TV show called Moonlighting, and it was with Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd. Do you remember that show?
It sounds very familiar, but I don't recall it.
Yeah, probably just before your time. It was probably in the 80s or whatever the case. But Bruce Willis used to just be kind of a TV actor. And they wanted kind of they didn't want an impression of him. But, he's kind of laid back and, he's kind of cool and kind of suave. And so they kind of wanted me there. And so Artemis was, hey, Luna, let's go save the Sailor Scouts, and it kind of turned into, Luna, get off my back, it kind of turned into that. So, hey, come on, Luna, let's go. Hey, come on, Luna. So it was still kind of my voice, but it was like when everyone else was going crazy, and, for all the Sailor Moon fans who were listening, how, Serena screamed and how Jupiter shouted and how Mars, did her thing, and I was just kind of there and kind of just, no, don't bug me now, Luna. Come on, let's get out of here. I was kind of a foil to all that. So it was a really fun part. I wish I could have done more or had more or been one of these scouts if they had a male scout, but they didn't. But being Artemis was awesome, and it was fun, and we did a lot of those shows. I was in quite a lot of those, 100-something episodes. I can't remember. It lasted for quite a while, and there was different characters playing different parts. But I got to be in there from start to finish, and it was a fun experience back then. Because once again, I was young, it was new, and no one had done anime before, and I don't think anybody had done this, the lip syncing, the dubbing before. And then we just kind of forgot about it for a while, and then all of a sudden, 10 years later, 20 years later, we started getting invited to these cons, and we started meeting the fans and started understanding just how deep it goes, just the impact it has for the fans. And it's, a lot of the fans who were kind of young or in their teens when the show came out are now, in their 30s or whatever, but they have daughters who watch it. And so, like, there's generational kind of fanship happening as well. But Sailor Moon was, that's really something. Nobody knew it at the time, but boy, that turned out to be one heck of a show.
It sure did, Ron. Well, I'm curious, what kind of advice would you give to somebody, maybe even a fan, who's inquiring about, pursuing a voiceover career?
Well, if you live in the Ontario-Toronto area, come take my workshop. But no, that was just no. I'm fooling. If your question was if they're thinking of getting into voice work, is that?
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's looking at pursuing voiceover as a career?
Okay. Well, first of all, you don't necessarily need, it used to be in the old days of Bugs Bunny and Hanna-Barbera and Walt Disney that all of the voice, the cartoons were over the top and big and goofy. And I tell my students that you don't necessarily have to talk like this or have to talk like this, because a lot of the cartoons these days, they're using people's more natural voices, just kind of maybe making them a little quirkier or whatever. So my first piece of advice is don't think just because you can't do 1,000 crazy voices that you don't have a chance in this field, because that's not true. Number two, practice, and play with your voice and your vocality. Just take your normal voice and, just make it nasally. Pretend you have a cold and all of a sudden you have this character. Or take it and just put a lisp on it and all of a sudden you have kind of maybe a geeky or a nerdy character. Or take your voice and kind of drop it by an octave. Or put a little rasp in it. Or, like, there's so many things you can do just to your natural voice. Everybody these days has have a smartphone with a voice memo or something like that. Start recording your voices. Like when I grew up, I just listened to things and I tried to imitate things. And if I heard Bugs Bunny on the TV, I'd try to I know I shouldn't bend left at Albuquerque. It wasn't great, but it just kind of like, okay, that's close. I can work on that. Or if I heard a sound of sometimes people's best voices come from not famous people or impressions, but just like their mother, their father, their brother, their quirky friend at school, the whatever girl in the corner. So just play with voices. Try to do some sort of anything to do with acting. You see, I draw a big separation between voiceovers, which is like commercials selling burgers for McDonald's or cars for Chrysler or something like that. That's one thing, but voicing animation involves acting and voice acting. So anything you can do to kind of community theater, or reading books, or in a community kind of setting or a public thing, volunteering at radio stations just to get yourself comfortable behind the microphone is great. I think a lot of places now have classes and workshops and things like that. But just don't be afraid to kind of go big and test yourself. I mean, it sounds cliche, but literally when it comes to animation voice work, the only limitation is your imagination. And as long as you have a vibrant imagination and you can go there. There's so many things you can kind of get yourself to do naturally. So I'm rambling on here, but basically practice all the different voices. Try different tongue placements and try different like nasal placements and try playing around. Try imitating aunts, uncles, people or people on TV or other cartoon characters. Sometimes when students come and they say, and they can do a great Bart Simpson or they can do a great, name a character, but it's not just imitating that character. It has to be creating your own characters and has to be committing to that character and being able to recall that voice and being able to act the lines. Like you're not just reading the words, you're becoming the character. So all of the above for starters.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
I don't know what that. Did anything relevant come out of that?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, definitely. You gave a lot of different avenues and perspectives on, different things people can try and things they need to kind of shoot for and pursue. So I really appreciate it because, everyone needs a foundation. And especially if you're someone that they grew up loving as the character Artemis or Morph or any of the other amazing characters you voiced, sometimes the advice that comes from that particular person, that special guest, can mean more to them than maybe the last guest I had or the next guest I'm going to have. So I appreciate it because every perspective is unique and special. So
I really appreciate that. And you know what? With everything online these days, like when I was growing up, you couldn't, or when I was starting off in the business, there was no access to websites that you could just kind of audition from home and or have a home studio and do it. And now there's voices.com and all these other places that you can go up to and just get some voices down and make a little demo tape and you can audition right online and and it's not that expensive to get a half decent microphone and a little system set up, and you can actually work in your pajamas out of home and do that. That wasn't around when I was doing it, but there's so many more opportunities. It's a catch-22, Trenton, because there's so many opportunities now, but there's also so much competition because a lot of people want to do this. So it's kind of a bit of a catch-22, but it's all out there for the taking.
Absolutely,
for
Ron.
the liking. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, do you have a website or social media, a way people can kind of reach out to you or ask questions or maybe inquire about your class if they're nearby?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm just upgrading my website right now. It might be down for about the next month or so, but starting in the new year, it will be ronrubinvoice.com. So that's RONRUBIN voice. ronrubinvoice.com, and there'll be information on me and some of my demo tapes. There'll be some of my workshops, and also, you know what? I haven't started this yet, but I'm thinking of doing Skyping workshops, so people from outside of the province, outside of the states, outside of the country can or anybody throughout the states can take a workshop with me just over Skype. So there's no longer boundaries. That's the other thing. When I had to do a cartoon, I would have to fly to LA or fly to New York, and you'd have to actually be there in person. These days, I can be sitting in Toronto and doing a cartoon out of LA and having the director there in one headphone and the art director from San Francisco in another headphone. So everything's become very global.
Yes.
So ronrubinvoice.com is where you'll be able to reach me, hopefully in the new year. And if you're interested in taking any sort of classes or Skype workshop with me or whatever the case, when I do get set up, I would love to be part of your future vocality. Is that a word?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Thank you so much, Ron. Well, I have two final questions for you before we wrap up here.
This has been fun, by the way. Thank you, Trent.
Hey, you're most welcome, Ron. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Well, the last two questions. Here we go, Ron. I want to know, what is your favorite cartoon character or show from growing up, and why?
And why?
Yeah.
From growing up. Okay, so it was a whole different ball game back then. I mean, I grew up on Popeye and the Flintstones and Bugs Bunny and that kind of stuff. And there was, do you know what? In all these years, no one's ever asked me what my favorite cartoon episode was. So I'm kind of getting stumped.
I'm the first one. Awesome.
There is this show. It was, remember how Bugs Bunny, did you even watch Bugs Bunny?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There was Bugs Bunny and then there was other, there was one episode that this man, it wasn't a Bugs Bunny, but opened up a briefcase and he had this black hole. Well, this black, say looks like a pizza, and he would throw it and it would become a hole, and he would then jump into that hole and go everywhere in the world and all these different adventures. Johnny Quest, I used to love Johnny Quest.
Oh yeah.
And I love the idea of kind of the unknown and kind of going on adventures. You know what? I can't think of one episode, but like I said, the Flintstones, Bugs Bunny, Mel Blanc. Talk about voice actors. There is the god right there. So anything Mel did, I would watch. And I once saw him interviewed on Johnny Carson, and he did all of his characters. And I said, "Oh my God!" And I was really young, and I said, I want to do that for a living. And my God, somehow, some way, luckily, I did. So I'm not avoiding your question. I can't. I'm
Hey,
going
it's
a little
okay.
brain
I
dead
understand.
right now.
No,
but,
you've mentioned
yeah.
so many great classical shows, the classic shows I grew up with as well, along with a multitude of newer cartoons like the reboot for Johnny Quest and others, but I loved all of those original shows that you watched as a kid too.
I know, and of course I'll get off the phone here and immediately say, "Oh my God, no! I forgot about my completely best one, and I have a great story to go along with it, but I've lost it there." But no, my after school cartoons were those. They were the Hanna-Barbera, the Warner Brothers, everything I just mentioned, and you didn't have the multitude of shows that. I mean, my God, there was like 3 or 4 or 5 kind of cartoons back then, right?
Yeah.
And these days, if you asked, someone what their favorite is, they could probably list you 2 dozen. So, but I mean, these days I enjoy watching all sorts of cartoons too. But back then, I think the old school, old-fashioned ones really did it for me.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you, Ron.
Popeye. Did I mention Popeye?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Okay, there you go.
I hated spinach, but I love the show. Now I love it. I love spinach as an adult, but especially fresh spinach on a salad. But it's always funny because mom would try to use that as the excuse. Oh, Popeye eats spinach, so you got to eat it too.
Well, exactly. I think back then every kid wanted to eat spinach to grow those big muscles, and I don't know. I think they were in cahoots with the spinach growing people with the cartoon. I mean, see, back then they would mark. That's the other difference with animation now and then is. Back then, if something was popular, you might get a spin-off marketing, doll or toy or something like that. And these days, it's almost the opposite. A lot of these, a lot of the mainstream cartoons are kind of like almost advertisements to sell dolls or whatever. So it was a little more pure back then. I don't know.
I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
I totally do.
Yeah.
It was a different.
I don't want to bite the hand that. I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me, but yes.
Yeah, I understand. Well, Ron, the last question I have for you today is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Oh, that's heavy. That's heavy, man. The legacy, you know what? I don't know. It's similar to the legacy that I to what I like to do now, and that's just bring. It sounds cliche, but smiles to the faces of people who watch cartoons, or memories of I guess my legacy would be. That guy brought a whole lot of smiles to people, and he was good and professional at his job, and he kind of created some of our favorite characters of all time. And I don't know, it's hard to talk about my legacy because it's hard to do that and put ego aside. But I would just like people to, if anything, remember me for creating some pretty fun, awesome cartoon voices that brought some joy to their life.
Absolutely, Ron. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I believe you have created a lot of characters that people have come to love, and it's brought them joy and happiness. So I think you've definitely, attained a lot of that, but there's still tons more shows you could do to continue that legacy of bringing laughter and joy and happiness to people. So.
Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate your words.
Hey, you're very welcome, Ron. Well, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today, Ron. Would you please give us a closeout today as Dr. Bad Vibes and Artemis from Sailor Moon?
I will.
This is the evil Dr. Bad Vibes. Also Ron Rubin on Who Did That Voice. So keep listening. Then this is Nessie Bear from Care Bears. It's saying keep listening as well. And this is Artemis. Hey, Luna, come on, get off my back. Artemis being Ron Rubin, being whoever he is, on Who Did That Voice. Meow.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Ron Rubin, the voice of Artemis from Sailor Moon and the voice of Morph from the 90s X-Men animated series. And if you did, please stop on by our Facebook or Twitter pages by searching Who Did That Voice and leave me a message. I'd love to hear from you. A question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Friday for our next special guest, Lane Weaver, the voice of Peter Pan from Return to Neverland. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.